Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get into the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. For that, we bring in Dr. Alon Burstein. As always, it's good to see you. Alon, let's get straight into the news here. The Associated Press reports that the first Friday prayers of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan passed without violence at the revered Al-Aqsa Mosque under tight Israeli restrictions amid fears that the ongoing war in Israel and Hamas would spark clashes in Jerusalem's Old City. Alon, we were speaking about how contentious this first Friday of Ramadan could have been. It's good news to hear there weren't any major issues, but why is it that this day is so significant?
So it's good to see you, as always. And I'll say that what has really happened, I mean, it's a little bit of history. What's really happened in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict sort of in the last 30 years is it's taken on a religious element. It used to be a nationalistic conflict, right? The PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, was really framed itself as national liberation. You know, its aim was equally to destroy Israel, at least initially, but it was national liberation. And when Hamas came into the picture, it really reframed the struggle as religious, and that centers around Al-Aqsa Mosque. Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, or Haram al-Sharif, which is the holiest site to Jews, also is the third holiest site in Islam. And the fact that, in Hamas's view, that Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa are controlled by Israel is the crux of their grievance. It's the crux of the fact that there cannot be a regime in this land that is not a Muslim regime. And if you look at things from that perspective, then it becomes very clear why Ramadan would be when violence would break out. Ramadan is the holiest time in Islam, and then within Ramadan, you have the first Friday and the last Friday as the holiest of days. So really, if you perceive the struggle as a religious struggle in order to liberate your holy religious site from infidels and invaders, you know, it sort of makes a lot of sense why things tend to break out here. Unfortunately, we have seen that it actually plays out historically, right? Whether you want to accept that point of view or not, the fact is that historically, the Second Intifada broke out because riots started on Al-Aqsa Mosque, on Temple Mount. As a result, Israeli police moved in, riots broke out, and we had the launching of an Intifada in the year 2000 for 5 years. In 2021, I mean, we had a lot of things in the middle. I'll just say also, like in 2021, the month of Ramadan, the first Fridays was when actually the war broke out, was when Hamas launched its first missiles towards Jerusalem in that round of escalation. It's seen as something that brings about a lot of religious fervor, a lot of religious commitment. You have a lot of people who are attending mosques. In mosques, you can have a lot of preaching that becomes radicalized. The result is that it's a very contentious time. It's amazing news, actually, that the first Friday went by peacefully. I will say that I'm still want to see that it happens in the next 24 hours because people often spend the night at the mosque. But the mere fact, most of the violence often breaks out on Friday. So the fact that it didn't happen now is very good news, at least for stability in Israel and the West Bank, despite, as was said, despite Hamas's attempts to bring them into the war.
Let's provide a little more context about what was happening there. The AP says Hamas militants have called on Palestinians to rise up and challenge tight Israeli restrictions on key sites like the mosque. Hamas hopes a fresh outburst of violence would put more pressure on Israel and improve its leverage in ongoing ceasefire talks, according to the AP. Alon, I want to ask you about leverage. Israel is continuing to slowly gain more ground in Gaza. The IDF seems to be more open to providing robust aid to Palestinians, which international allies will see as a positive. We also know that the people of Rafah will eventually be relocated to humanitarian islands before a ground offensive, which we are still waiting to learn more about. All that taken into account, Israel's actions indicate a slower, more calculated approach as of late. Does a more careful Israel diminish Hamas's leverage in the long run here?
To some extent. I mean, there's two different things that Hamas really is hoping for, right? The first was something we've talked about many times, that Hamas really expected Hezbollah to join the war. They really expected Palestinians in the West Bank to rise up. They did not expect to be fighting this war against the IDF alone. And that is one of the reasons that Hamas in Gaza is in somewhat of a bind, right? You know, a lot of people are saying, yes, it is very obvious that they really built up their strength, but clearly they didn't think that they would actually be able to hold off the IDF, as we've seen that they have not. I mean, they've really slowed it down, but the IDF has managed to invade where it wants to invade. So what was their plan? Well, their plan was to have the IDF busy. The IDF was supposed to be busy with Hezbollah and busy with the West Bank. Ramadan is, to them, another attempt. It's another strategic moment to say to the Palestinians in the West Bank. In fact, the message that they put out was very clear. It said, the people of Gaza have been fighting to protect Al-Aqsa by attacking Israel since October 7th. It's time for you to do your part. It's time for you to rise up. So they really were hoping, first of all, to just get the IDF distracted. That will militarily help them, right? The more the IDF has to worry about violence elsewhere, the less it can worry about Gaza. That's from the on-the-ground strategic point. The other point is the international pressure. Hamas's plan is to hold out as much as possible, as long as possible, in hopes that Israel will be compelled to accept a ceasefire and withdraw from the Gaza Strip. This may happen because of international pressure. It may happen because of the hostages. It may happen because of internal Israeli pressure. But Hamas really just wants to hold out that much longer. If violence were now to break out in the West Bank, if during the month of Ramadan, we still have 3 more weeks, if violence were to break out in the West Bank, we're going to see that much more pressure on Israel, both within Israel and internationally, because it's now not just going to be Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, which, again, Israel can frame is in relation to October 7th. All of a sudden, we're going to see Israeli massive crackdowns that are happening in Jenin, in Tulkarem, in Nablus, and that is going to lead to a lot of pressure on Israel saying, what are you doing? You're now launching a war in the West Bank. So Hamas really would hope to gain not only the physical advantage of having the IDF be involved somewhere else, but the logistical advantage of having a lot more pressure, which, again, as they said, would put them in a stronger position to leverage on Israel to accept a ceasefire and IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, which is really their hope.
Now that the first Friday has passed, do we still have, as you mentioned, weeks of Ramadan left. I believe it ends on April 9th. Does that mean that the Middle East will be on extra high alert until roughly early April?
Absolutely. And not only that, the last 3 days of Ramadan are sort of the crux of it. I mean, again, it's if you want to look at, Christmas and New Year's Eve, right? There's a lot of lead up to them. There's a time in the middle, but really, there are the days that people get together, that families get together, that people can are attending church more, so to speak. So in this case, in the mosques, the same thing. The last days of Ramadan are the height of the height, and it's 3 days. So that's going to be in April. But yes, you're absolutely right to mention the Middle East, because it's not just what's happening in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. The entire Middle East, Ramadan is a time of religious fervor. We're seeing this also with the Houthis. The Houthis have threatened to up the ante and carry on more attacks because it's Ramadan. We've seen Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, make speeches saying that he's going to escalate things as necessary because it's Ramadan. And there's going to be a lot of pressure also in countries like Jordan and Egypt on the politicians saying, well, it's Ramadan now, and that means the Muslim world should be coming together and helping each other. What are you doing for Gaza? What have you done? What have you done recently? So we're likely to see, even if we're not going to see the outbreak of violence, hopefully, we are likely to see a lot of escalation in rhetoric in the coming weeks throughout the Middle East, leading up to that first week in April, which is really going to be the crux of it, and we'll see what happens after that.
I do want to talk about the Houthis in a bit, but first let's discuss the escalating fight between Israel and Hezbollah on the Lebanese border. Reuters reports that skirmishes in Lebanon so far have largely been calibrated to avoid a major escalation, but they nonetheless have pushed tens of thousands of people from their homes on either side of the border. The agency says that Israeli strikes have killed more than 200 Hezbollah fighters and some 50 civilians in Lebanon, while attacks from Lebanon into Israel have killed a dozen Israeli soldiers and 6 civilians. I think we've been working under the assumption that if a ceasefire was reached in Gaza, that would likely also stop the fighting in Lebanon alone. But is this situation up north becoming a fight of its own? Could this spin out of control even if an Israel-Hamas truce is achieved?
Very likely, yes. It is becoming its own sort of element to deal with for 2 reasons. One, as you mentioned, it was at least perceived several months ago that a truce between Israel and Gaza will mean a truce between Israel and Hezbollah. And that is in fact what happened in the week-long truce in November. When the minute the truce came into effect, Hezbollah said, we support Hamas. If Hamas accepts the truce, we accept the truce, we're not firing. And at that time, Israel was also saying it is only going to return fire with fire. Israel is not going to initiate anything in Lebanon. The tables have changed a little bit. Israel has since then initiated its own rounds of attacks in Lebanon. Israel has said, you know what? We're not just accepting that if Hezbollah fires, then we retaliate. And if Hezbollah doesn't fire, then we're okay. Israel said, no, you know what? We're not okay with Hezbollah having a threat of fire. Israel's no longer okay with Hezbollah having its forces on the border with Israel, because Israel also has a problem internally. As you said, tens of thousands of people. I believe in Lebanon, it's 100,000 people, something like that. And in Israel, we're also talking about roughly the same numbers, maybe a little bit more, have been evacuated from the border areas. In Israel, there's a lot of political pressure because people are saying they are clearly not going to feel safe to return to their homes when Hezbollah is still on the border after October 7th. In October 7th, right, the sense of security in Israel was completely shattered. People living on the border with Gaza have been killed and kidnapped. Hezbollah is stronger than Hamas. So people are saying, you have to deal with this, Israel. You have to deal with this threat. It can't just be if Hezbollah stops firing, then we don't fire and we're okay with that. So Israel's taking a different tack. The Minister of Defense in Israel has openly said that the truce between Israel and Hamas, should it happen, is not going to apply as far as Israel is concerned to Hezbollah. That's its own entity. And Hezbollah has said, well, if you're going to open fire, FYI, we're going to retaliate. So neither side has declared open war on each other. And neither side has said, okay, so we're carrying out the invasion on this and this date, or we're carrying out this barrage of rockets on this and this date. So neither side has escalated to the element of we're now openly engaging each other with as much force as we have. But both have sort of suggested that the truce between Israel and Hamas is not going to be enough to placate this situation as well, which is one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of diplomatic efforts. We've seen a French proposal. We've seen the U.S. envoy, Alon Burstein, trying to develop his own proposal to try to come up with some sort of diplomatic solution for a separate agreement between Israel and Hezbollah that will be disconnected from the war, so to speak.
And we will be watching the northern Israeli, southern Lebanese border closely. I want to close out here with another Iran-backed group, the Houthis. The AP reports that the longer the war in Gaza goes on and Yemen's Houthi rebels keep attacking ships in the Red Sea, the greater the risk that Yemen could be propelled back into war, according to the UN Special Envoy for the poorest Arab nation, Yemen. They were warning about it this week alone. We've watched over the months as this Red Sea situation has devolved from an annoying disruption of goods to a conflict resulting in sailors being killed, at least one ship being sunk, and numerous military responses by the U.S. and coalition partners. All this, yet, as you can see on your screen, we still hear of the Houthis harassing ships and promising future attacks. Is an all-out war with the Houthis actually in the cards right now? Are we getting to that point?
Unfortunately, it's a little bit similar to the situation between Israel and Hezbollah. Both sides, in this case the Houthis, let's say the coalition forces, both sides are signaling that they are not interested in full-out war, but also signaling they're not willing to stop the current situation. So the United States has sent this coalition because when the Houthis first started firing at ships, the world didn't really respond. Right? There was all kinds of local responses, and eventually the United States launched this coalition to say, okay, it's time to take an active stance. But also that active stance is not saying, okay, we're going to go all out and invade Yemen and take out the Houthis. It's just saying, again, if the Houthis fire missiles, the United States is going to respond. If the Houthis were to say tomorrow, declare that the war is over, they're stopping to fire missiles, the coalition would be fine with that. So on the one hand, we have a situation where both sides are threatening each other, threatening escalations. The Houthis, like I said, for Ramadan, said that they're going to escalate. There were reports several days ago that they may have gotten hypersonic missiles and that they're going to escalate the war on the one hand. On the other hand, they haven't done that. They are continuing to fire at ships. They have sunk ships. They have done a lot of things that obviously are terrible and violate all kinds of international laws and treaties. But they haven't brought it to the point where they're saying, we are declaring all-out war and we're firing at every U.S. ship that we see, and we're this and we're that. In turn, the United States, same thing. The United States has said, we're prepared for war. We're prepared to do whatever it takes. We're prepared to stop the Houthi threat, but this is being done with several bombings here and there, taking out Houthi drones, taking out missiles, not with an all-out invasion. Both sides are sort of playing within a framework of saying we're going to fire at each other, but not break the bank. But like we said with Israel and Hezbollah, all it'll take is unfortunately one misfire. If the Houthis actually manage to, let's say, sink a passenger liner or something and 300 people are killed, it's a game changer. And all of a sudden you have open war. So we're not seeing either side having an interest for open war right now, but the powder keg is there. All you need is one match and it could blow up. Remains to be seen.
What would be the implication if that were to happen, if some sort of wider conflict were to take place in Yemen? What would be the implication on Yemen, which is the poorest, as we mentioned, the poorest Arab state in the region? So they're already in dire straits. How could a further conflict further impact Yemen?
Yemen is really a tragic country. Ever since sort of unification in 1994, it was run by a dictatorship. It was very mismanaged. Then in the Arab Spring in 2011, the dictator was overthrown, and then the country again got torn apart by war. When the Houthis started to gain ground in 2014, Saudi Arabia declared war on them, largely due to rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia did not want exactly this. They did not want an Iran-backed enemy sitting right at their doorstep. Yemen is south of Saudi Arabia. As a result of that war, Yemen suffered the largest catastrophe that the world has seen. It was the country that had the most famine in the world. People were starving nonstop, and really the situation was just beyond dire. That started to get better around 2020 when the sides declared a tacit truce, and then after a while actually started negotiating, and it seemed like maybe there would be some sort of stability. And we also saw that was the reason the United States took the Houthis off of the terrorist list, was because the United States wanted to coordinate the entrance of aid into that country. So we saw things getting better. If all war breaks out, we're going to see things again reversing. And as you said, the initial conditions in Yemen already are primed to be terrible. They're primed to have a lot of famine. They're primed to have civil rivalry and civil war. If such a war would happen, it's going to be catastrophic for the region.
So many threads to follow in this war alone. As always, thank you for helping us break it down. We always look forward to your daily war updates on your own YouTube channel as well. Take care.